Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of the Boxscore Geeks show. I am your host, Patrick Minton, otherwise known as the NBA Geek. And with me is my both producer, co host, manager, voice of God, etc., Brian Foster. He can also be found at Boxscore Brian on Twitter.
Sounds like a busy show for me tonight, Patrick. A lot of
It's
things to
going to be a
do.
busy show because you've got to fill Dre's shoes because unfortunately our other typical co-host Dre Alvarez is not here tonight, so we're gonna have to somehow fill the void left by his sexy radio voice. And I think that falls on you because my radio voice is not very sexy.
It's not bad, and we'll see. We'll see.
I always go more for the sort of like the expert commentary guy who isn't really expected to have a good voice.
There you go. Exactly.
Dre plays the role of the host who is expected to fill in the silence with his I don't know. Is it a baritone? Is that what would you call Dre's voice a baritone? It's probably a baritone. As the audience falls asleep while we're talking about a guy who's not even here. Anyway, we have a great show. We're going to talk a little bit about the playoffs. We're going to talk a little bit about Kevin Love and what that means. We're going to talk a little bit about Defensive Player of the Year stuff, and we're going to have an episode of Fuck That Guy. So stick around and grab your vodka and soda or your whiskey and seven or whatever it is you drink and enjoy the show. So, first up, I think we'd like to talk a little bit about some of the playoffs, some of the things that happened last week. The one that Brian is most excited about, I'm sure, is the Golden State Warriors zoomed past the New Orleans Pelicans, sweeping them 4-0. How do you feel about that, Brian?
It was a pretty brutal series. It was almost unreal
Brutal?
in a way.
What do you mean brutal? Don't you live in San Francisco? What's brutal about this?
Just the performance of the Warriors, the beatdown that they put. I mean, I hate to use these war references and violence
I guess
analogies.
I assume that New Orleans Pelicans fans would think it's brutal.
Pelicans got brutalized.
Warriors fans would think it was poetic and beautiful and elegant and any other words you can sort of pull out of your.
I guess it was poetic, and especially that ridiculous game 3 that we're going to get to a little bit later.
Well, actually, let's get to that right now.
Oh, right to it. Okay, good. So
I mean, unless you just want to talk about the overall bracket, but that doesn't really sound very exciting to me. We're gonna get to that in the. Right now, the bracket is 3 TBDs: Cleveland, Washington,
all right, we'll
Golden
show
State,
it.
and then the winner of it's most likely it's Houston, and then the winner of of San Antonio and Los Angeles. But anyway, let's talk about that game 3 for a second because basically I guess we're going to talk about is the so-called cheat code theory.
That's right.
Which
that
is
guy,
that,
Dre Alvarez, who's not here. This is his theory.
This is Dre's theory that San Francisco. It's Golden State. Sorry.
That's a Freudian slip there, moving to San Francisco.
It is a Freudian slip. Actually, you're from that area. Is there like a thing where people in Oakland are like, no, fuck the Warriors, and people in San Francisco are like, you go Warriors, or vice versa? Is there anything like that?
I'd say there's an undercurrent because if they were not, the best team in the NBA, I think it would be a lot worse. If they were muddling along like usual, there'd probably be signs and complaining and all that. But
is there anybody like in Oakland that like roots for Sacramento or anything like that?
I say it remains to be seen. I don't think it's going to be a big deal, but I mean, there is some, if you ask people to reflect honestly, there's going to be some sadness. I'm sure when that move finally does happen, guys like Kevin Draper and maybe Ethan Sherrod-Strauss as well, the locals who grew up in this area, they'll be sad about it, but we'll have to see.
So right now, the arena is in Oakland, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's the Oracle Arena. So there's been a few sites. The first was Pier, 32? One of the piers there near the Bay Bridge. It was crumbling and falling down, and it just cost too much to repair it. Larry Ellison didn't want to repair it for the America's Cup. So they were going to build a stadium there, but now they got some land directly south of the San Francisco Baseball Giants Stadium, and they will be building a stadium there now, allegedly, it looks like. With stadium deals, especially ones like this one that are not publicly financed, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, the soon-to-be San Francisco Warriors. I can get right into this cheat code theory of Dre's, though.
Yeah, let's go for it. What's the cheat code theory?
So the cheat code theory, I believe, was mentioned on this show a few weeks ago, and what he said was that it was written about Ricky Henderson originally, the great, again, baseball player. We're getting back to baseball. It's that time of year. And what Dre said about this was basically Ricky Henderson, his jump off the base was so fast that the amount of time it took for the pitcher to release the ball and the catcher to throw it to second, it sort of broke the competitive rules of the game with his athleticism. It just made it too hard to throw him out stealing a base, and that's why he was so good.
And the analogy here is how fast Stephen Curry can shoot the ball.
That's right, and we'll get to the name pronunciations probably later in the show as well.
Stephen Curry. God damn it.
That's okay. And
it's like I already learned this lesson last week, but I just keep doing it. But so the thing, I've said this long ago, even though I can't pronounce his name, I've been watching him all year. The fact that Steph Curry is so good at shooting threes isn't what makes him so awesome. It's that he's so good at shooting threes in such a incredibly short amount of time that it takes him to shoot. I mean, because usually, when you do things fast, you get sloppier and you're not as good at it. It doesn't really matter what it is, what sport you're in, or what expertise you're doing, and usually the faster you get, the sloppier you are, and faster can be relative for, a person. Like, I mean, we could be talking about a chef chopping onions that can go really fast, but what I'm saying is if that same chef, however fast he chops onions, you tell him, I want you to chop the onions twice as fast as you normally do, he's probably going to get sloppier, right? His onions he's not going to cut himself, but his, the dicing sizes of his onions is going to get sloppier and things like that. I mean, and I think the same is true in the NFL. Usually you take a random guy and say, I want you to shoot like you always shoot, and he'll hit X%. And then you say, now I just want you to shoot twice as fast. Suddenly his technique's probably going to fall apart and he's not going to shoot as well, which is kind of what you used to see all the time at the All-Star Games sort of three-point thing, right? The difficulty of the All-Star Games three-point contest is that you got to do it fast. And Stephen Curry just seems like an exception to this rule. He's like, it almost seems like the faster he gets his shot off, the more likely it is to go in, right?
Well, if it's one of those TV cooking shows, you might want them to screw it up so then he can yell at the sous chef a little bit and create drama. But
no, it's Gordon Ramsay then, yes.
Yeah, exactly. No, but Dre's original point on this was he brings this up when we talk about how Curry is so good at shooting off the dribble that most players, just like you were saying, they lose percentages on their shot when they're going off the dribble versus catching and shooting. If you look at Kyle Korver, for example, he shot, I think, 49% this year. He shot most of them catch and shoot. Yeah, that would have been epic.
Just missed the first 50, 40, 90 season ever. Anyway.
But somehow Curry is a cheat code, and he can have this super fast release and do it off the dribble, and that's the cheat code. So, Dre said this based off of data, but then we just had the most, epic eye test example. This happened in that Game 3. I won't even show the video of it. Everyone's seen it a million times now. The way that Monty Williams, the coach of the Pelicans, described it in the post-game press conference is, when asked why didn't you guys foul him so they couldn't make the three in the tie of the game, they said, we tried, we couldn't foul him. He shot it too quickly. And then, for those who didn't watch the game, he took a shot, it was missed, they rebounded it, he took another shot, it went in, and they went to overtime. However, he was fouled on that shot, and it still went in.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on, that was a 4-point play. Why the hell wasn't that a 4-point play? I mean, that was... he got mugged on that. I just don't understand. And I don't know if I missed it, but I didn't see one of those things, where usually the league comes out a couple days later and says, oh yeah, that was a foul. I didn't see any report like that. Then again, they may not have done it just because the game ended. I mean,
you don't want to pile on the Pelicans after they had lost.
Right. But I mean, yeah, that was nuts.
But yeah, that's it on that point, though, for that series, is that kind of something that we've never seen before in the NBA, at least not me anyway, that I can remember. It was amazing.
Yeah, I still don't get it that, well, at least before the Kevin Love injury, I was in Vegas last week, and the Warriors still had worse from the bettor's perspective, odds of winning the championship, right? I mean, the Warriors were 9-5?
Last time I looked of course, before the Kevin Love injury, and the Warriors were both 9-5. This was, I think, last
Right, which
week.
is so. I'm sorry. I mean, I get that they've got LeBron James, but I don't understand how anybody could think that those teams have an equal chance of winning the NBA championship. Now, I get that Cleveland has a simpler road to the finals, but then so if you said, okay, the Cleveland's road to the finals is a given and they're in the finals, you can't possibly think that that's an even matchup, right? I mean, does anybody really think that in a straight up matchup between the Warriors and the like if we just today said, okay, forget it, we'll just advance those to the finals and we'll start playing today, nobody could possibly think they have equal odds of winning, right? I mean, Golden State has got to be favored in that matchup.
I'd guess that even if Kevin Love still had a labrum, and by the way, the NBA and
Dirty right
TNT,
there.
yeah, the NBA and TNT gone fishing photo is kind of in poor taste now, considering Love's injury. Olynyk had actually ripped off his arm in the photo, which was kind of gross. But no, like I think you're right. If Love had been healthy and those two had met, the Warriors.
Even with a healthy Love, there's just no way you
Yeah.
can say that that the Vegas odd makers are gonna that the point spread is 0 in every game or whatever. It just the point spread slightly favors the home team every. There's no way.
It's all off based off the East being weak. It's all because the East is weak, I think.
Well, sure, but I mean,
They still have to beat a team from the West. You're right.
They still have to beat the Hawks, and
Yeah.
I mean, the Hawks are well. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe the Hawks won't even get out of Brooklyn. Who knows? I think I do remember thinking like when I was in Vegas and Love got injured, I was like, I should place a bet on the Hawks to win the East really, really fast before the odds adjust themselves. But then I didn't do it, and I feel kind of stupid about it now. And then like I was on the plane home, and Arturo tweeted out said, "Hey, the Hawks are 3-1. Isn't that like to win the East, not to win the whole thing, to win the East? Doesn't that seem insane? Like the Hawks have to beat the Nets, and I'm fairly certain Darren Williams is not going to wind back the clock 5 years for 3 more games. So they got to beat the Nets, and then after the Nets, they play the Wizards, right? I think that's the way this works. Do they play the Wizards? Yeah, they play the 4-5 matchup winner. Yeah, and so I mean, I'm sorry, but I can't possibly think the Wizards would be favored in that matchup because there was, by the way, a great article in Grantland about how terrible Toronto's defense was against John Wall and Marcin Gortat, and basically I think that the Hawks are going to play much better defense than the Raptors did, and suddenly the Wizards don't look so hot. And I mean, the Wizards are going to look a lot more like a 50-win team than the 70 team they looked like against the Raptors. I mean, basically, what the article's about, I think I can see you're looking it up right now. What the article's basically about is how Toronto, unlike the way most teams do it, the league has moved in pick and roll defense. The league has moved a lot more towards ice, what they call ice defense.
Coach Nick would be proud of you for bringing up ice.
Yeah, which is where you try to place you try to place your so the guy who's guarding the ball handler, he tries to hedge and kind of get in between the screen and the ball to sort of prevent the screener from what you're really trying to do when you play an ice defense is you're trying to because when you play a pick and roll, often what you're doing in addition to the two-man game you have with your guy, you're also just trying to change the position of the ball on the court so that the defense has to rotate a lot. So you're trying to go from, for example, from like you might be going from the far left side then towards the middle, or from the middle to either the left or the right side, or even from like the baseline and then to the top. Because when you shift the ball in those kinds of movements, the weak side has to adjust a lot because the way defense is, there's a strong side and the weak side is away from the ball, right? And so when you move the ball really quickly, that really rapidly changes where the strong side is and where the weak side is. And especially in the NBA with the defensive 3-second rule, that means that the weak side defenders have to move a lot, right? Anyway, this is what almost all of the sort of modern teams are doing. It's basically, it's a revolution that essentially Thibodeau started. The Bulls do it, and the Spurs do it, and like tons of teams do it. And it, by the way, and it's really fucking hard to do it against the Golden State Warriors because it kind of involves hedging off the ball handler a little bit. And when your ball handler Stephen Curry, that's really dangerous, right? Um, so anyway, instead of doing that, the Raptors play an old school style where the big man comes up and so the ball defender kind of plays straight up on his man, and the big man comes up and he's supposed to basically jump out and like to where the ball handler's coming over the screen. He jumps out and tries to like basically slow down the ball handler really quickly, and then after the ball handler's man recovers, the big man is supposed to go back to his man.
Is that the hedge, or is the hedge something different?
You're kind of, I think they're kind of similar, but so that I think the hedge is really a part of the ice defense.
Oh,
Where,
okay.
so if you even go back as far back as the '90s, the Bulls were doing this a lot when the Bulls played Utah in the series. Often it was really crazy. You would see these setups where Ron Harper would, like, let's say John Stockton's on the left side, like dribbling around the 3-point perimeter. You'd see these crazy setups where Ron Harper is actually standing closer to the middle of the court than he is to the basket, essentially leaving John Stockton an entirely clear path all the way to the basket. But what he's doing is trying to prevent Karl Malone from going and setting a screen sort of in that elbow area that would let John Stockton dribble over the elbow, and because then the ball moves and then Malone rolls, and then somebody comes to help Malone, and then two weak side defenders have to get off their man, and then Hornacek is free for a three. Like, all kinds of crazy rotation things happen when you allow the ball to sort of switch sides. So basically Harper was trying to use his length because he was like 6'6" with extremely long arms, and Stockton was like 6'1" with average arms, right? So he was using his extremely long length to basically say, I'm just going to hedge over here, way over here. I'm going to give Stockton a clear path to the basket. But since I know Stockton's left hand is kind of he's going to have to go back to his right to make a layup. I'll be able to recover and block that shot if he tries that. And he was basically, he was looking at it. It looked like cheating. It looked like he was basically standing there saying, hey, you want to go this way to the basket, be my guest. But if you want to go this way over the screen, you're going to basically have to go out of bounds and over the half court line, right? And that's kind of what teams try to do in the ice defense, because the guy on the ball is hedging against the screen, right? But the jump is basically the screener's defender, tries to basically jump out into the path, and he tries to do it really quick, just like quick enough to make the ball handler sort of stop or change direction or something like that. And it tends to be very hard to do. You need athletic, quick big men who are good at jumping out and then recovering. And you gotta protect against, for example, the worst thing that can happen to you is that the ball handler does what's called like splitting the. It's like splitting a double team, where the ball handler then goes in between the guy who got screened and the guy who's jumping out. If the ball handler does that, then all kinds of havoc is going to ensue, right? So you have to jump out, but you can't jump out so aggressively that you give that big gaping hole in between you and the guy who's getting screened.
I don't know that term, unfortunately. No Coach Brian here. You'll get no help from me.
So anyway, this is basically what Toronto runs, is that, jump out and recover. And I mean, it's kind of like the article in Grantland, which I think is by Zach Lowe, says, like, you kind of had to, like, it was exactly how John Wall was abusing this. You kind of had to like replay almost every offensive set to make sure, well, did I not just see exactly that basket? Like, am I watching a replay of the previous basket? Because Washington just did the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, where they ran, Gortat would set a screen around the top of the key, and they would run John Wall. And because they were playing that jump style and they weren't icing, they got to do all kinds of like crazy things where Wall was able to make the jumper overcommit, and then that would create crazy pick and roll opportunities. And it was It was like Washington was using a cheat code. It was like when you're playing NBA 2K whatever and you find the one move where the defense always fucks up until you have the shot that like always goes in. That was what it was like to watch Washington play against the Raptors.
Sadly, I don't have
I
YouTube
don't really
working
play
right now.
NBA 2K whatever. I'm just assuming it's like this. I mean, my sports video game stuff kind of goes back to the original PlayStation. I'm pretty old school, but you remember how like in hockey there used to be that shot where if you took the shot just after your guy was crossing like the half court line and you timed it just right, then it would like always slip through. It was like some kind of random number generator, right? Where the goalie could never block that shot. It just felt like I was watching the NBA version of that every single offensive possession for the Wizards, which is weird because, I mean, Randy Whitman would not have been high on my list of genius offensive coaches.
Okay, so I want to have a quick aside here on that. How big of a deal should this clipboard thing be? Is it totally ridiculous, or does he deserve some shit talking for that clipboard?
I wish that the Vine was like 1 or 2 seconds longer because you could sort of see the expression on Bradley Beal's face for me.
I haven't seen that.
I felt like I would have loved to see the conclusion of the look on his face because I felt like the eyes were about to go back in the back of his head and his hands were about to go up and be like, what the fuck? And I think that's the thing that you worry about is, you know, because I feel like if I saw Steve Kerr doing that, then you'd see a bunch of players kind of laughing and joking around and say, Coach, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Whereas instead, we're kind of looking at Bradley Beal like, why do I have to look at this shit every fucking day, man? I'm getting sick of this shit. This is so nasty. It's like, kind of gives you the impression that stuff must happen all the time, just from the expression on the players' faces where they're just like, this can't be life. What the fuck is going on here? Right? I mean, am I right? But I feel like if you see Bud or Kerr do that, then suddenly you'd see like Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry kind of laughing at him, and then Steve Kerr going, "Yeah, that was pretty stupid, huh?" And instead, you just see all these players kind of staring at him like, "Dude."
So the clipboard itself doesn't matter; it's the body language of the players. I like that take.
That's my take on it. I don't know.
That's a good one.
Anyway, let's move on. The Golden State crushed New Orleans. There wasn't the predicted one game that, you know, they would get just from the other cheat code, which is Anthony Davis. But it was close. I mean, they almost got one game. That's what I mean by it was close. Let's talk a little bit about the other 4-0 series that mattered, which was Cleveland destroyed the Celtics. But it was kind of a bittersweet victory because Olynyk pulled some kind of a move out of the ECW or something, and just like I can't believe that there are people out there saying, "Hey, yeah, no, it was kind of a dirty move, but it wasn't really intentional." Like, okay, obviously he wasn't intentionally trying to dislocate the guy's shoulder, but how can you look at that clip and not say, "Yeah, he was intentionally like doing something nasty to the guy's arm"? Right? I mean, he was intentionally doing a thing that any sane player would know could possibly result in an injury. It's like, okay, yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to hold the guy's head as we fell to the ground, but I guess I wasn't trying to give him a concussion. It just happened. But you were holding the guy's head in a headlock. Oh, well, yeah, but I wasn't trying to give him a concussion. It's not relevant whether he was trying to, like, dislocate his shoulder. It's relevant whether he was doing something dirty that could result in an injury, and he was. And it's like when I see, like, some players talk about how, oh, that shit happens all the time, I'm going to have to refer to another Grantland article where it was like, yes, this shit happens all the time for, like, a fraction of a second under the basket when people are fighting for a rebound. It does not happen all the time when two people are trying to move like 2 or 3 meters chasing a loose ball that is going out of bounds on the sidelines. There's no place for that. Like, and usually, you know, it's like, I'm going to hold his arm real quick, but then when the ball comes down, I'm going to let go of his arm so that I can catch the ball. There was none of that in Olynyk. There was all just, I'm just going to hold his arm. I'm just going to hold his arm forever. I'm never going to let go of his arm. Like, that's a dirty play. That's a really dirty play. Am I wrong?
I have a tough time with this. I mean, to me, this is similar to a much lesser degree, obviously, than, you know, a lot of the old players of the NFL come out and said, concussions aren't that bad. You know, I had some, so they're not that bad. And it's like, well, Maybe they were okay for some, but they weren't for others. There's a reason why this is banned, you know? There's a reason why it's against the rules. I read this somewhere on social media that reverse arm pulls are banned in judo, even. So I don't know if there's any judokas that listen to this show, because I don't know that if that's true.
Could somebody that does judo tell me if what he did would have been illegal in a judo match? Because if it is, then it's probably a very good reason you shouldn't be allowed to do. I mean, here's another thing. He was suspended one game. So clearly the NBA said, okay, he did, this was a dirty play. So what I don't get here is if the NBA looks at this and says, yes, this is a dirty play, how can they come to the conclusion to say, well, it was a dirty play, but it was only worth one game? Wait, what? I don't understand. To me, this is just like...
From the Roger Goodell School of Suspensions?
Well, and to me, this is the same kind of thing as maybe it's like with the law. Like, I always have a trouble understanding why attempted murder carries a lower penalty than murder. Because it just seems like, well, the only difference is whether or not you got it right. It's like...
Under that logic, though, maybe...
I fucked up. I didn't quite murder him, so I guess I don't have to go to jail as long. I've never quite understood that. And it's same thing here. It's like, well, Kelly Olynyk tried to do something really dirty, and so we're going to give him one game. He could have done a lot worse, and I don't understand. And I don't understand how... I mean, first of all, I don't understand how he stayed in the game. Because, that's... when you look at that and you look at what happened with J.R. Smith and then later Kendrick Perkins, and I don't want to excuse those players' behavior at all, but I do want to say part of your job as a referee is to make sure that your punishments are of the correct nature because that helps de-escalate violence from happening, right? It's like, I've seen this a lot in tons and tons of games. Like, one of the things that always gets me pissed off when I'm a coach is if the refs are calling a game really loosely and they're just not calling very many fouls and they're like, let them play. And I'm like, well, let them play generally escalates to let them foul, and then let them foul generally escalates to let them throw punches at each other. And I think not throwing out a player after a situation like that is asking for trouble. I don't think there's anyone who can argue... if he'd been thrown out of the game, then Kendrick Perkins doesn't come in the game and do what he does, and J.R. Smith doesn't come in the game and do what he does. And again, that doesn't excuse their behavior, but the nature of the sport, these are players going hard at each other. If the players see that referees are not properly punishing players for when they do things wrong, then A, the players think that they can get away with more, and that leads to more and harder fouls. And then B, players start to think, well, if the refs aren't going to police things, I'm going to police things, and things get out of hand. That's kind of just my take on the whole Kelly Olynyk thing. And
I think the bottom line is it's clear that it is a dangerous move to, the reverse arm pull, as that judo guy called it. And regardless of if it is banned in competitive judo or not, it's clear it's dangerous. Love's labrum was broken. So why are people trying to defend it? Why is it happens all the time, a good defense?
Help me out. I don't know much about medicine. So broken labrum, is that like a rotator cuff tear? Is that a dislocated shoulder? What is that?
Yeah, labrum, I believe, is a muscle or tendon in your shoulder. And it's probably the only one in my shoulder that I haven't hurt, but it's supposed to be very painful. And yeah, he's going to be out months. He's not going to be able to use his arm.
Yeah, so this, I don't. Have you ever done anything? You have done a lot of things to your shoulder. Have you ever dislocated a shoulder?
Partially, but I have had a torn rotator cuff. Yeah, well, partially.
I've had a torn rotator cuff.
It hurts.
The partial dislocation. How long did it take you to recover from that?
It's been like 10 or 15 years, and it's not fully all the way back yet. Like, it's just a lifetime injury.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
But, how long did it take before you were comfortable doing any kind of sport?
No, I didn't want to lift my arm above my head for weeks and weeks and weeks. You can't even lift the weight of your arm.
Yeah, I just thought it was hilarious that when the Spurs said... when the Cavs said their first one was he'll be out at least 2 weeks. And there are all these people on Twitter going, whoa, he's going to miss the whole Chicago series. And we're like, what the fuck did you think was going to happen? The initial diagnosis was a dislocated shoulder. This is not like in Lethal Weapon where he puts on a straitjacket and he jams his shoulder into the desk and he's like, oh, shit, that hurts. And, oh, okay, I'm fine now. That's not...
No, I made that joke, actually, to my physical therapist. A guy I know in high school did that. He rammed his shoulder into the wall of the gym to put it back in socket, and he he's a pretty relaxed guy, but he started lecturing me. He's like, "Don't get any ideas. Realize how serious this is. These are really serious injuries." So,
Yeah. And
just to say it happens all the time, plays like that, we better find a way to stop them then, because let's look at the business impact now, like we always want to look at. Just because there's some like jock code that you should be able to pull their arm, you want one of your biggest stars in the league, Kevin Love, to miss all this time? That's crazy.
Yeah, and right now, in my mind, Kelly Olynyk is the new Brian Cardinal, who is a player that Heat fans will despise until the end. I mean, so
Patrick Beverley is a comparison I heard too.
Right, okay, so I really like Mark Cuban, and I think he's a really great businessman, and I like the stuff he does in a basketball sense too, and I like the way he builds his team. But whenever they say, "Oh yeah, we won that 2011 and 2010 11, right? We won that series because of all these analytics and shit." I'm like, "You won that series because in game 3, I think it was, Brian Cardinal gave Dwayne Wade the hip check to end all hip checks, and Dwayne Wade was not the same for the rest of that series, and he played really hurt. And between like games 1 and 3, Dwayne Wade was like superstar shooting guard, and in the rest of the series, Dwayne Wade was like Rashad McCants, and that's why he won that series." End of discussion. And Kelly Olynyk might now be the difference between a Cavs Eastern Conference championship and not, or maybe even an NBA championship. Who can say? But on that, I think the Spurs still, God damn it, the Cavs still have enough firepower to win the East, because one of the things they'll do to compensate is they'll put Love at power forward, where Love is probably the best power forward in the world.
You mean LeBron?
What's wrong with me?
And also Tristan Thompson will get more minutes.
Probably they're going to move LeBron full time to the power forward spot, right? And then insert another shooter into the lineup. Or maybe they'll try out like the Matrix at small forward or something like that. I mean, I think it's a bit of an issue how many shooters they have, because before the season we thought this was going to be like a crazy 3-point shooting team with like Mike Miller and maybe Ray Allen and all this stuff, but it kind of hasn't worked out that way. So shooting might be an issue for them, but they're going to have LeBron at the 4, which will be a pretty big deal. They
got J.R. Smith to shoot the ball.
Well, he's out 2 games.
Oh, no.
I don't think that'll be as bad as people think either. But you either have LeBron at the 4, or you're going to basically put Tristan Thompson at the 4. I think the only thing they have to avoid is playing lineups where like Thompson is the center essentially with LeBron, right? I mean, I think Mozgov at the and LeBron is a fairly decent front line, and Kyrie Irving is still kind of Kyrie Irving, having the best season of his career. I think that they still have the firepower to win, but again, I would, if I was going to pick a team to put money on, it'd probably be more the Hawks than the Cavs right now. So
we got a lot of topics. So we got about 10 minutes left.
I'm going to go 15.
Okay.
So let's skip the Spurs. We're going to talk a little about the Spurs, but I feel like we say the same goddamn things about the Spurs every time, right?
Spurs are good.
Spurs are good. Clippers are good. Flip a goddamn coin. That's what I got to tell you about this series. Flip a coin. So let's talk a little bit about the NFL. So big announcement today. The NFL decided that they aren't really a nonprofit organization, and that they are going to end their tax-exempt status. My theory on this is, when the NFL gave up that tax exemption, my theory is that, first there was a thing of like, okay, if we're not a nonprofit, then we don't have to embarrass the fuck out of ourselves every year by disclosing how much money Roger Goodell makes for fucking everything up all the time. That's one big thing. The other
$36 million, by the way.
Yeah, we know. And it's not like suddenly we're like, oh, I wonder how much Goodell makes now. He's going to make the same amount. Like, he's going to the same or more. It's not like next year he's going to be suddenly making $20 million. That was a bit of a, like, kind of a thing, when they give up the tax exemption, then they no longer have to publicly report how much money everybody earns. The other bit is, this is only the NFL headquarters. This isn't the NFL teams. So, the revenue that the NFL headquarters declares is a small portion of the NFL's total revenue because you can't confuse the revenue that each team generates with the revenue that that office generates. And I think the math was that it's going to be like $6 or $7 million a year, maybe $10 million a year that they're going to have to pay in taxes now. The third thing is this, of course, has nothing to do with the real taxpayer subsidy, which is the fact that almost all the stadiums are built using public funds. And then fourth and finally, I think the reason they did this is because they knew that legally it was going to happen anyway. I mean, the Congress was going to make it happen, the courts would make it happen, and then when that starts happening, people start asking, well, if it becomes a legal thing where a judge comes down and rules that you are not a nonprofit and you cannot have this tax exemption, if that happens, then people at the IRS start asking questions. Well, wait, what about past years? How long has this been the case? Was that the case in 1970? Was that the case in 1980? Was that the case in 1990? And suddenly you got the IRS rummaging through your books trying to figure out if you owe back taxes. And I think that's a scenario that they'd love to nip in the bud too. Like, okay, okay, wait. We're not a nonprofit. It must have just changed. Last year we were a nonprofit, but some small things changed. Next year we're no longer going to be a nonprofit. We're good now, right, guys? That's basically what Roger Goodell is saying, right? We're good now, right? We're good. We don't need to look at 1984 or anything like that, right? We're good. I think that's basically what happened here. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I definitely agree. And I have kind of a off-the-cuff side question I thought of on this. Do you think that maybe Roger Goodell and the head of the NFL, the other executives, do you think they're a little gun-shy after trying to cover up concussions and cover up domestic violence? Do you think they just finally said, look, guys, we just can't keep lying to our fans. We have to finally get in front of something here.
Well, I think it was more like, if we're going to keep lying to our fans, comma.
Oh, fair enough.
Then we should probably, get in front of the ball and kind of create a little bit of goodwill here. I think that's what's going on here. I mean, I don't think the NFL is going to stop lying to their fans, which is.
Oh, so they're picking their battles to lie on. Okay, yeah. I like that. I like that.
And this is a battle that they definitely would have lost, because there's already people from senators and congressmen are calling them up and asking, hey, what's the deal with this, 502C or 503B or whatever the hell the status is that you guys
501C, yeah.
501C. Like, what is that about? And when you start getting the attention of congressmen and then those congressmen and those senators, they would love to fight like a public opinion battle, something that is, as far as ruling the nation, is kind of meaningless, but the kind of thing where basically all of the nation would be like, yeah, why are you a nonprofit? And the NFL would really love to not be on the wrong side of that.
I love that point. Piling on pro sports is definitely red meat for politicians. That would be a great opportunity for them.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Great. Okay, we said all that. I think we've got about 10 minutes left for an interesting edition of Fuck That Guy. For those of you who are not in the know, Fuck That Guy is a segment of the show which we stole from the now defunct podcast, Short Corner podcast. Each of us, and I think today we're both going to pick the same guy. Each of us picks a guy that either we're really sick of, or maybe we're really jealous of, and we say fuck that guy. So there could be a positive fuck that guy in the sense of, this guy's too good at basketball, fuck that guy. I've seen that happen multiple times, and I think one of my fuck that guys was a basketball player, but I can't remember who it was.
For being too good? Yeah.
I was like, wait, why? This guy shouldn't be this good. Fuck that guy. Like, you could just be like, you could say like that Stephen Curry is too good at basketball. Like, fuck that guy. That's not fair. But today I think we're gonna have a guy that we really would love if we could just fuck that guy, and not in a literal sense.
So what about this? You can go down that rant, and then I have a little counterpoint at the end, maybe, instead of my own fuck that guy.
Counterpoint?
Yeah, I have a small counterpoint.
So Dre's the one that brought this up, but like, if we were going to resurrect a segment of fuck that guy today, this definitely would have been my choice. today my big fuck that guy is to Stephen A. Smith, who has got to be. If you'd like, read today's Deadspin article about Stephen A. Smith because he's just gone from Okay, so I always thought Stephen A. Smith was, when you walk into the bar and there's like one section of the bar, there's all the locals kind of getting drunk and they're talking about sports or politics or whatever, and they're kind of all just regurgitating populist shit, and they just kind of all there's always the one guy at the table who's kind of dominating the conversation, and he's always saying things that he thinks are like provocative and outrageous, but all he's really doing is shouting shit really loud. And then if people doubt it, he'll shout it a little bit louder and he'll enunciate more, and it'll be, it'll be like, Stephen Curry is the best damn basketball player in the NBA, motherfuckers. And then, people will be like, yeah. And there'll be one guy at the table who'll be like, well, I don't know. You could make a case for LeBron James. And he'll be like, Stephen Curry is the best damn player in the NBA fucking A. And it's like, everybody's kind of drunk. And, nobody is in the conversation to actually have a discourse and come to any conclusion. Just the drunk guy shouting, like, just, he's not going to change his mind in any way. And Bayless and Smith are just like the two drunk guys shouting shit at each other, and they're never going to change their minds. But somehow he's like up that level of ridiculousness to basically becoming a worthless human being. With all the shit he's been saying about, domestic violence, and I didn't even realize this. I was caught this from the Deadspin article that way back in 2010, he's like, I can't possibly believe that Floyd Mayweather put his hands on a woman. Like, oh, because he only had about 5 incidents on his public arrest record, you can't possibly believe he would do that. And then he, and then like not too long ago, he's basically saying that, Ray Rice's girlfriend should have known better and shouldn't be going around provoking violence like that. And then this week, or last week, end of last week, beginning of this week, I'm not sure exactly when it was, he gets in trouble again because now he's saying he basically told his colleague that obviously she only disapproves of Floyd Mayweather because she's a woman. Because clearly a man could not possibly object to a guy being a wife beating, girlfriend beating, random woman beating asshole. Only women could ever possibly object to that. And I just think, Stephen A. Smith, fuck that guy. You have a counterpoint to this? You really have a counterpoint to this?
Sort of. Okay, I'll temper that I'll temper that a little bit. So, first off, the quote from the Deadspin article was, let me bring this up here. Stephen A. Smith has transformed himself from garden variety shill and troll into a kind of cartoonish super troll. And it's true. And that's kind of where I want to go with this slight disagreement. So first off, everything you said is true. I mean, no, he's not a great guy, probably. I've never met him in person, but I probably wouldn't want to have a beer with him. That's fine. But where I'm coming from with this is, I don't know, maybe it's because I was a student of political science, but I always look at systems over individuals. So Stephen A. is this individual. They got Skip Bayless there. They have some other guys like that. But the way I look at it is that those two guys, they're always kind of dancing on the line, of what's acceptable. And
I feel like Stephen A. Smith is really just trying to be like populist.
Sort of. So when you're talking about the two drunk guys, in the room that won't shut up, I think they're I guess I'll say him because we're just talking about Stephen A. here, but I think he's pandering to that guy. ESPN and Stephen A. are tapping into that idea that people like to be outraged, I guess especially when they're drunk. So let's be outraged every day about everything possible. So
yeah,
he's gonna be.
I guess that's another way. It kind of reminds me of the drunk guys at the bar.
Yeah. So
like every discussion, their viewpoint is one that's fueled by outrage, even when they're saying stuff that everyone's agreed with. They're doing this thing where they're pretending to be, or maybe they are internally just outraged about it.
Yeah, and who knows if he really is outraged, but it's his job to be outraged every day, basically. And
yeah, I just don't understand who buys this shit. Like, who, I mean, like, I don't know who's listening. Who? I mean, or is he like the heel in wrestling? People,
That's
everyone
right.
hates him, and the only reason they listen is because they love to hate him.
I
And
didn't think of
I
that,
don't
but I
mean hate
agree.
him in terms of like, thinking he's goofy. Because like, let's look back at Ric Flair. We all love to hate Ric Flair, but we kind of liked Ric Flair, right? It's
Well, and
like,
it's the
you know,
opinion though, right? Like they're trying to craft their opinions such that they're controversial enough so that everyone like us will talk about them. I mean, they succeeded, right? Here we are talking about it. We wouldn't have if he had been more
well, yeah.
mild.
I mean,
But
this is not the kind of publicity I would want if I was the guy.
okay, that's fair. That's
And
fair.
here, okay, let's move on from domestic violence.
Okay.
This goes back to the incident in 2010 I was just referring to. At the time, Stephen A. Smith responded on Twitter to a guy who says, "Here's a guy on Twitter tweeting at Stephen A. Smith after he defended Floyd." Right? He's like, "Pro sports does enough to make us look like pigs without you advising the ladies and suspending judgment on Floyd. Please stop it." To which Stephen A. Smith responds, "To hell with you. Don't evade the reports that this grand larceny charge is over a damn iPod. It's not about a woman." Which is, okay, really? So, first of all, it was an iPhone, not an iPod, because after beating this girl senseless, he beat his ex-girlfriend senseless because his ex-girlfriend had the audacity to start dating another dude. He beat her senseless and then stole her phone. And this is a pretty common tactic amongst abusers because you steal the phone, they can't call for help, they can't call their friends, they can't call their boyfriend, etc., right? They got to go get a phone from somebody, and how embarrassing is that to say, "Oh, hey, my ex-boyfriend beat me up. I need a phone." That's not exactly, a moment that every victim wants to live, right? So he took her phone. So first there's that. Like an iPhone and an iPod are not even in remotely equivalent because I don't know if you're like me, half your damn life is on that phone. Like there's a contact number to everybody you know, and there's like all your email and there's all your music and shit. Like it's all in the cloud. It's like, you know, half of your life is on that phone. Maybe 3/4 of your life is on that phone. And second, okay, let's assume it is just that, and it's a few $100. What fucking world does Stephen A. Smith live in where you steal something worth $300 and it's not grand larceny? I'm sorry, but if you beat the shit out of somebody to steal something that's worth $300, that's grand fucking larceny. Most people don't walk around with a watch that's worth $300 on them. But if you get mugged for your watch, you go to the police, and the police are going to charge the guy with grand theft larceny if they find it. This is not rocket science. So you're seriously saying it's okay because it's, quote, a damn iPod? Stephen A. Smith, fuck that guy.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sorry, am I outraged enough?
I won't counter that at all.
Brian's like, ooh, he's getting serious now. I'm going to stop bugging him. What do we got? We're almost done. We got shout-outs. You got a shout-outs for us?
No, I don't think I have any. No, I guess.
Wait, you don't
sure.
have a shout-out?
Not this week. I know I've been pretty good lately, but yeah, sure. We'll do our regular shout out. Jonathan Weiler for the ESPN watch piece.
Oh, he's really killing it with Floyd Mayweather coverage as well. My shout out is to Daniel Roberts, who is the author of the aforementioned Deadspin article, also known as Iron Mike Gallego. He is, what's his Twitter handle again? I just followed him. Well, it's easy enough, I think, if you just Google Daniel Roberts and Twitter.
It is at uppercutting, as in doing multiple punches.
Well, that's his handle on Deadspin, but
My apologies.
He is at Iron Mike Gallego on Twitter. Really good stuff. You know, he's a boxing fan, but I won't hold that against him. Not the biggest fan of boxing, but he does. He seems to have. He seems to be pretty good at. What would I say? Talking truth to power in the boxing world. He's obviously not a big fan of Floyd Mayweather or of Stephen A. Smith, both of which count as extreme pluses in my book. So he's definitely worth a follow. And I would also echo your sentiment that you should follow John Weiler at John Weiler on Twitter. Although, frankly, if you've been listening to us this long and you're not doing that already, I don't know what's wrong with you. It's really probably the best sort of blog on the internet in terms of sort of critical thinking about sports media, right there. And I like that. He doesn't offer he doesn't usually offer a ton of opinions about the actual sports and performance. He's not getting into arguments about who's better than whom very often, but he's always quick to point out the sort of hypocrisy in the mainstream media. And honestly, I don't know. I don't know how he does it. I mean, the title of his blog is it's the ESPN Watch, and I think the subtitle is because someone has to. And he seems to watch a lot of absolutely putrid stuff on ESPN and or listen to some crazy bad stuff on ESPN. I don't know how he can listen to, all these shows on ESPN radio every day and watch, things like First Take, etc. every day without like literally giving up hope on humanity.
One thing
I
he
don't know.
did point out, though,
That's,
which is funny, which we've pointed out before too, is that in fact his title of the article, bring it up right here, is Mayweather, ESPN on Mayweather, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he pointed out that ESPN had a lot of good coverage of Mayweather as well, a lot of bad coverage, and then of course the Stephen A was the ugly coverage. So
yeah, I think the ugly bit is that how much more airtime it got
exactly,
outside the lines
yep.
stuff, which is just yeah. Okay, I have no other shout outs. Do you have do you have anything quick you want to cover before we say goodbye here?
I'm ready to say goodbye.
We're ready to say goodbye. Thanks again for watching. If you didn't find us from boxscoregeeks.com, you can find us there, or you can find us on Twitter. Sorry, not Twitter, on iTunes. And you can find us on YouTube at the Nerd Number channel, Nerd Numbers channel. And you can find us on Stitcher. Is that right?
And
Brian?
yes, and also Libsyn, I believe.
I have no idea what Libsyn is. Man, I thought I was an internet guru, but I don't know what Libsyn is.
We need to get Dre's input on this. See, we're worthless without him. We're just rambling.
Okay. Thanks for joining us again this week. I am I am at NBA Geek on Twitter. Brian Foster is Boxscore Brian on Twitter. You can find us most weeks on boxscoregeeks.com on Mondays. And we hope to see you again next week.